Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this webinar. I've been looking forward to this. Doug and I have been in conversation for probably decades now, but we haven't talked about this book in particular, and I'm really excited to be in conversation with him. I'm Marina Gorbis. I'm Executive Director of the Institute for the Future. I'm here in Palo Alto, actually in our office, which is really exciting because we haven't been in real life in the office in a long time. This webinar is a part of the project we've been doing called Equitable Enterprise Initiative. And Doug has been serving as an advisor to this project and contributor, among others. We started this project because all the research we were doing on future work and where technologies are going, we're frustrated that a lot of conversations was focused as a solution to skills and changing technologies and doing all these things. But we felt like people were not looking enough at the nature of the enterprise, at the nature of corporation itself as a cause of these vast and growing wealth and income inequalities. So we started this project with the help of 5 foundations to which we're very, very grateful. It's a 2-year initiative to examine what are the forms of, first of all, what is the causes that of these kind of inequitable enterprises. These are the foundations who've been supporting this work. It's Hilton Foundation, Kellogg, Irvine, Robert Wood Johnson, and Ford Foundation. And as I said, we're very grateful for their support. But what we've been looking at is, first of all, the causes and kind of the levers, like what can be done to create more equitable enterprises. And also looking at different forms of these kind of equitable enterprises, whether it's cooperatives or community trust, public banks, purpose companies, all kinds of examining all of that. And you're welcome to see all of the research. We're in our 2nd year, and we're doing regular deep dives in different aspects of this research that we are publishing, and a lot more is coming out. We're doing ethnographic research and interviews, and hopefully with the idea that there's lots of levers that we can use to create more equitable enterprises. I'm just going to say that. And as I said, Doug's been active contributor, but in addition to that, those of you, Doug probably doesn't need much introduction. He is a professor. He is a media theorist. He's a writer. He's a performer. I don't know, is there anything, Doug, you haven't done in your life? He, as I said, we've been in the conversation. He's been a friend and fellow traveler and advisor for ever since I came to the Institute, which is over 20 years ago, a long time ago. So he has this new book. And I have to say, I actually looked at the whole kind of history of Doug's books. And the first one, I think, was Siberia, right? Siberia, like cyberspace. So you are responsible for coining the term cyberspace. Are you
not cyberspace? That'd be William Gibson, but I guess I did Siberia. Got a few cafes named after it. Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to look at kind of the history of all these books, starting with Siberia, then the media virus, and then throwing
that I coined.
Rocks at the Google bus, Team Human, and now Survival of the Richest. So we'll have to talk about this 20-year, right? It's about 20-year span between the first book, or maybe a little bit more.
Now we might be closer to 30, 1990.
30 years, wow.
93
so it's interesting, starting with
yeah.
Siberia and going to Survival of the Richest. There is a story in that in its own right. But maybe just start with that. Let's talk about Survival of the Richest. So what is this book about? With this very, very provocative title, Survival of the Richest.
Yeah, it's interesting. In some ways, the provocation of the title and the opening episode is distracted people from the main point of this book. So what happened was, back in 2018, I was invited to do a talk about the, digital economy and the future of technology for one of those groups that people like us get invited to go speak at that help subsidize our writing habits. And I'm out in this beautiful resort, sitting in the green room, waiting to be taken on stage, to be mic'd up. And instead they bring these 5 men into the room, into the green room, and they sit around this table and start asking me all these questions about, really where to place their bets, where to put their money, Bitcoin or Ethereum, virtual reality or augmented reality. For them, unlike for the Institute, the future is this fixed thing that you bet on the most probable outcome. It's not, you can't change it. You can't influence the future. You just bet on it, right? So that's such an active approach. But then they finally got to the question, Alaska or New Zealand, where it's the better place to put their bunker. And we spent the rest of the hour on these really bizarre kind of Walking Dead-like questions that these tech bro billionaires have about, about which disaster is going to come, what's going to characterize the event. Is it a pandemic? Is it nuclear? Is it an EMP? Is it social unrest? Is it from economic collapse? And then, there's talking about their bunkers and their facilities and how they've got Navy SEALs, always Navy SEALs, never Army Rangers, interestingly. It's Navy SEALs that got contracted out to take care of them. And I finally, because I'm this kind of person, I'm like, well, I asked them, how are you going to keep control of your Navy SEALs once your money is worthless? If the apocalypse you're talking about is happening, your Bitcoin or your dollars are not going to, why are they going to take care of you? And I saw a couple of them jot down, figure out how to, take care of Navy SEALs. And they went through, again, a very Walking Dead-like, super simple, almost simplistic, childlike rationale for what they would do. Like, oh, I'll be the only person with a combination to the safe where the food is, or everyone will have an implant in them that determines what rooms they're allowed to go in. And we could use them kind of like advanced shock collars to punish people. And I realized, at that point, oh my gosh, there's something more going on here than meets the eye. And it set me out on the 5-year journey to figure out, what is this mindset? What is this kind of, and I would argue, Silicon Valley mindset where technology and capitalism kind of dovetail to lead these people to think that they can somehow earn enough money to insulate themselves from the reality they're creating by earning money in this way. Where does this escape fantasy? Because it's not just they're not just preparing, they're sort of actively inviting a very strange catastrophic future, and sort of to look at where does that come from, and how do we avoid adopting that mindset ourselves.
So did you find yourself kind of going on a tour of these kinds of places and events where people come together to talk about escape hatches and how to survive the apocalypse?
Well, at the very beginning, I looked at some of that. I looked at a few of the people who were, because I got a lot of emails. I posted an article about that meeting, and I got emails mostly from companies that were catering to the prepper billionaire.
I find it really interesting, actually, how you write kind of in a very critical way about this mindset, right? And it seems like a lot of responses that you get are people who are trying to sell you a new kind of escape hatch or some solution, right? Like, what is that about?
It is interesting. It's almost a weird techno-solutionist self-confidence. But, I got positive emails, I guess, from both sides of the spectrum. A lot of them were the tech bro type people who we know, who may have a plan for an eco village. There was a Stanford guy who's basically a game designer who has a Sim City like future idea. There's Jim Rutt with Game B, that we sort of graduate from Game A into Game B. So people, I would say, more from the at least initially progressive pro-cultural side. But then there was a MAGA guy who's got a bunch of farms, and that he was originally head of the Chamber of Commerce for America in Latvia after the fall of the Soviet Union. So he learned, what does it look like to rebuild a society after it's fallen? And he's got these farms, and he invited me out to shoot with him and to see, the chickens and the biodiesel and all what he's doing. So they weren't, but that's the way we are. They weren't so interested in the aspect of this that I'm looking at, which is, where does this mentality come from? This apocalyptic isolationist thing. Where does this extreme techno-solutionism, where does the belief that you could somehow build a car that could drive fast enough to escape from its own exhaust? Where does that come from? And I'm interested, like we talk in Equitable Enterprise about it, I'm interested in it more from, the perspective I see in, say, Cory Doctorow's articles. He just wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago about Epson printers. Fascinated me. And he, found the proof that, okay, Epson makes this printer that is pre-programmed to brick itself after a certain number of pages. And they argue that there's some little sponge in there that might get filled with ink. And after a certain amount of time, well, you wouldn't replace the sponge. You just throw away the printer and get a new one. And I'm figuring there's a guy at Epson who is as smart as us, certainly wealthier than us, who's making a conscious decision that, okay, I understand I'm going to be creating more toxic waste that my kids are going to have to deal with. I understand that we're going to have to send more enslaved children into mines to get the rare earth metals to make a new printer. I am doing a bad thing for the world, but I believe that the margin that I'm going to make on this poor choice is going to be high enough to at least push me further away from, in other words, somehow insulate me from the damage that I'm creating. And that's
do you
what I'm
really
interested
think
in
that
looking
people who are, and by the way, feel free to use chat, the people who are participants with your comments. And also if you have questions, put them in Q&A, we'll get to them. Do you really actually think that people who are creating these products or designing them, that they think about the negative, all of these, what's called externalities, but they're actually the main things about it.
Right.
They're not externalities, they're very critical. But, or is it, do you think that people don't even think about this? It's my job, and the mission is to create profits, to create a product. That's how I get my advancement. It's this kind of mentality that actually does not look at the larger social implications of what we are creating.
Oh, they're looking at them. They're just looking at them from what they would call a systems approach rather than a human approach. They're doing it from with an almost a sociopathic relationship to the rest of humanity and nature. Yeah. And they've been looking at it, as I can tell, for hundreds of years. When Hobbes told the people who are colonizing the Americas and South America that it's okay to treat the Native Americans, the indigenous people, treat them like animals. He's got these great quotes, treat them like they're just like tigers or trees or shrubs. They're not fully human. He wouldn't have had to say that if the people going out there weren't thinking, I feel a little bit bad about just killing all these people. They wouldn't have needed a philosopher to tell them it's okay. They're not really people, so you've got that on the side of the capitalists, on the side of the early, British East India Trading Company and those companies. You have philosophers sort of giving them intellectual ammunition to divorce themselves from that feeling. On the technology side, I mean, you've got it goes all the way back to and I often quote him, to Francis Bacon and the invention of empirical science, where he said, empirical science will allow us to take nature by the forelock, hold her down, and submit her to our will. And that's the technologist's understanding of the world, that with science and technology, we can take all that scary, weird, female, dark, natural, dirty soil, worms, and scary lunar stuff, and, quantify it or quantize it, and we won't have to worry about that anymore. And where you end up when you get the two of them together in a kind of digital society is this real desire to sort of rise above everybody else, to, as Stuart Brand said, we are as gods and may as well get good at it. So if they're the gods, we're the ground, you're not them.
You talk about this mindset. So talk about, what is that mindset? What is that, what you were just talking about? Is nature, we're here to control nature. We are as gods, and we're going to get there through technology. What is that mindset? And also let's talk about the language of the mindset. Like, what are the terms?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at the mindset. The easiest way is that I have enough money and technology to escape the disasters of my own making. But sort of deeper than that is this, the mindset is a Silicon Valley belief that humanity is a problem to be solved with technology. And that's it's colonialism, domination, extraction, monopoly, and then move on. And you keep doing that and then you move on. But they've reached the limits of the industrial age. They can't simply outrun us. There's nowhere left to go. So I feel like what they're doing now is, rather than moving on or moving further west or accelerating, now because of digital and this whole digital realm, now the mindset is about going meta on all of us. You call it meta, metaphor, Zuckerberg's meta, or the philosophy, meta modernism, that they're one level above. So it's Peter Thiel saying, let's go from 0 to 1. We should operate one order of magnitude above everybody else. Or Zuckerberg going meta, or Jeffrey Epstein being kind of I'm a conscious being and everyone else is just run by their selfish genes, or businesses operating not just on the level of financialization, but derivatives of financialization and derivatives of them. It's the extreme, the extreme is they objectify. It's the objectification of so much of reality that they end up really objectifying themselves. They've got this goal to become self-sovereign individuals. I hear that a lot, self-sovereignty. And when you take apart the phrase self-sovereign, what does that mean? You're king of yourself. So you're both the royal and the subject, right? You are king of self. And that's sort of where I see the mindset. I mean, I kind of broke it down in the book, that the mindset is that you can outrun the externalization of damage. It's got a sort of atheistic scientism, a belief in techno-solutionism, an adherence to the biases of digital code, a fear of women and nature, an understanding of all human relationships as market phenomena, the need to own everything, every idea is a piece of IP and utterly unique and without precedence, that everything is progress and choice and moving on and sovereignty and going meta and becoming a god, that you can actually just level up and execute this exit strategy from life itself.
And so what do you feel like, is there something unique to Silicon Valley? Is it something unique American? Like, are most of the preppers and people doing it, they're mostly Americans? Is there something in this culture that we've cultivated? And the other thing is, why did this culture win in some ways? Like, why is that became kind of the dominant narrative in which we all exist, right? That this is like all those terms, exponential, this, disruption, all the language, or what Josh Bersin calls the register in which we exist, all these things that were good things that we should all aspire to. What is it underneath this? And we have some questions. I'm going to get to them, but let's start with that.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I've thought a lot about it. And if you have a culture that dedicates itself to war and domination, right? Dominates its own, even, subjects its women to unfair labor and no rights and all, and dedicates itself to making spears and gunpowder and all that. And it wants to take what belongs to an indigenous people that are living in a sustainable way. It's like you put a guy on steroids in a boxing ring against a guy who's not on steroids. The guy on steroids, short term, is going to win that fight. He's got that. Short term, right? Yeah. Long term, it's going to cost, but short term, and all we're talking about is really the last 2,000 or 3,000 years. That's short term as far as reality is concerned. Right. It's a drop. So yeah, that's winning. And with that virus, with the virus of domination, the virus of capitalism, the more of the world that we can convince that the symbol system that we invented, that this numerical map of value, that is real, then the more we can dominate, and that's really what they've done. What capitalism has done is it's convinced people that these numbers are what they are worth. And it's why, Silicon Valley guys who are more prone to this kind of, I don't even want to use spectrum disorders, because I know that people with spectrum disorders don't all fall into this. There's a kind of there's a flavor of Asperger's that they have, which allows them to sort of distance, look systemically. They're systems thinkers, and they're not all even spectrum people, but there's a systems thinking that is at a remove. It's the kind of people who would look at the homeless problem in Berkeley and say, this is an urban problem, not a human problem. Right? It's a problem for the city. So it's our system. And that's not, nature is not systems. That's another metaphor for how nature works. And they mistake it for, oh, nature is a system. It's not.
Yeah. So go back to when you wrote Siberia and all of us, there was so much excitement about the internet and democracy and how it's going to democratize everything. And everybody went with this huge expectation of creating commons and this very transformative, positive vision.
Yeah.
Now here we are. What happened?
A few things happened. I probably, through my career, I may have blamed capitalism too much, because I was part of the Mondo 2000, Timothy Leary, Terence McKenna kind of psychedelic, cyberdelic rave culture. Oh my gosh, the internet is going to allow us to model, James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis. We'll become the networked brain and reach collective consciousness. And we're going to unleash the unbridled creative capacity of the human imagination through these nonlinear technologies. We're going to move into an open source read-write reality instead of the read-only reality that we were in. And then along came Wired magazine and said, oh no, this is a business opportunity. So all of the creative possibility of the net had to be narrowed down to the profitable probabilities of the net. Once you're betting on the future, you're going to use technology to increase the probability of the most profitable outcome. So they turned technology around. Instead of it being a tool for us to use to express wild potentials, it became a tool to use on people, stickiness and attention economy and eyeball hours.
It's basically like the technology itself that has all these possibilities for all of the democratic things and open and commons based has been actually taken over by the mindset.
Yes, but, and this is where I was wrong, is in that the technologies themselves, digital technologies, are also biased towards a certain abstraction. And I didn't take that into account. I remember I was with Timothy Leary when he was reading it. I'm just rereading it now. When he was reading this copy of Stewart Brand's Media Lab, and he's writing all these notes in it. It's all filled with like, "Fuck you, Stewart." It's filled with his with his writing. And I'm sitting with him all afternoon as he's reading this book and writing in it, and I'm thinking he's loving it. And then he finishes the book and he goes, blah, and he throws it across the room. It breaks the spine, throws it against the wall. I'm like, what? And he goes, first, less than 2% of the names in the index are women. That'll show you something. And then he said, and second, these guys are trying to recreate the womb. He was a psychologist, right? Their mothers were unable to anticipate their every need. And so they're trying to build a technological womb around themselves that can anticipate what they want before they even know they want it themselves and bring it to them. And I realized that it was he believed that they were afflicted with a certain view of using technology to isolate and insulate and detach themselves from the scariness of reality. And that's the more science and technological thread that I hadn't really considered until then, which is the more Francis Bacon, we can just quantize reality and it won't be so scary to us anymore.
Or the way I think about it, it's kind of like this discomfort with ambiguity, like things that can be measured and seen and become everything that's which is very human, right? Like context behind it, all of that it's sort of like it's seen as a bug that needs to be fixed.
Right.
So
and in digital in particular, where everything has to resolve to a 1 or a 0, even what's so-called fuzzy logic is just about figuring, well, which one is it? Fuzzy logic just resolves it, whereas when you want to make something human, like, I don't want to get too techie, but like a technology like anti-aliasing, which is just throwing sort of these little random dots around the corners. when you want to make an AI seem more human, you have it do random things. You just add noise. That's not more human. That's just noise. So to the digital realm, ambiguity and all that stuff that makes humans human, our ability to embrace and sustain ambiguity over time, that is judged as noise, like junk DNA. When I'm arguing, no, the junk DNA might be the human story.
Right. And overall, I think like in sort of building that mindset, if you look at our education and what we've been pushing, it's all about STEM, and it's less investment in humanities and arts and everything that's human, right?
Right.
So
What
we
has
have a
utility?
whole-
It's capitalism. What has utility value for the CEO that's basically determining the curriculum of our public schools?
Yeah. So let's go into the David Sasaki's question, and I'm seeing lots of questions about. It's good to complain about the super rich, and we're all doing that, but it doesn't seem to change behaviors. So what do we do? What's to be done? The famous Russian Chernyshevsky, "What's to be done?" question.
Right.
What do we do?
Well, I'm not complaining about the super rich. I'm encouraging people to laugh at the super rich, right? Because what's to be done first?
Yeah, we don't have enough theater in this and humor, right? Like we need to do more of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why most of my books till now, they've been pretty much straight polemics, except for the novels, their arguments. This is a book of stories, right? This is me arguing with Richard Dawkins that human beings have souls, right? And then him yelling at me and calling me a moralist, but then showing up on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, right? That's not to say he's bad. It's to be able to laugh at these people that we've held up as heroes. Elon Musk's and the Peter Thiels, they are pathetic. They're scared little boys running away. To Jeff Bezos on a rocket ship is the ultimate example of white flight, right? So don't complain. But what we do is first we help see them as small and powerless. We realize they're not meaning to save us. At best, they want to save their own asses and leave us behind and even use us as fuel for their rockets. Use the real world. They want to convert as many atoms into bits with their Bitcoin as possible, right?
I kind of think about it. How do you see this as not a virtue or something to aspire to, but kind of a disease condition? You start seeing it as hoarding. So it's a virus that needs to be avoided. But how do we do that? How do we change the register where this is not an aspiration for a lot of people, but it's actually something to be avoided?
Well, first by storytelling, right? I think the tragedy, you identify too much with them. Comedy, you make them, they start to seem smaller. So comedy is definitely one way, learning how to laugh at this and see, and not in a ridiculing way, but to see it, oh, poor babies, poor babies. When I engage with there was a guy who ran one of the major social networks, was concerned for me that I was writing too many articles that were critical of AI. And he was like, "Doug, aren't you worried that when the AIs are in charge,
they're going to go after you?"
And he told me that he doesn't write at all about AI on any post on social network because he doesn't want the AIs to be able to turn on him later. And I'm like, well, if the AIs are that smart with all their machine learning, aren't they going to be able to tell that you've selectively removed anything? And then and he was like, oh my God, right? So that's funny, right? That these guys are that funny. These guys that guy's super crazy wealthy from his social network. And it's like, oh my God. All right, you're that stupid. Fine. Second, then it's and this is stuff we talk about in well, at least the my side on the equitable enterprise thing is how do you engage people, re-engage people in local economic activity, reintroduce them to the ideas of the commons, get people sharing stuff with their neighbors. I'm encouraging. I think I got this from Cory Doctorow too, is that rather than every family on the block having a minimum viable product drill from Home Depot, what if you have one good drill on the block and everyone goes and borrows it from the guy who has it? And we share stuff with each other. I mean, I think it starts that simply. It's meeting your neighbors, learning that they're not threats, and then starting to build local commons and community supported agriculture and all that kind of stuff from the bottom up. And as we do that, we start to recognize, oh, look at this corporate monopoly over land. Look at how hard it is to get a tractor that can't be turned off by Caterpillar remotely if I don't follow their service terms. And we start changing things as we need in order to sustain ourselves.
So is it kind of small communities, people coming together and kind of dropping out, or sort of creating different systems?
I think 99% of us don't need to be involved in this conversation, except to the extent that we need it as encouragement or to have enough faith in each other and our neighbors. But, you know, I mean, it sounds unrelated, but I remember I got emails people wanted me to comment, journalists, on Biden's war withdrawal strategy from Afghanistan when that was happening. And I was like, I know nothing about how to withdraw from a war. I know nothing about Afghanistan. Why are you asking me to comment on that? And I realized that there's an extra 100 million people with an opinion on this that don't need to really have one, you know, and that's sort of, I think that's true with everybody wanting to, you know, have their own exit strategy and their own investment platform and their own this. It's like, no, you know, we can, for the most part, turn to each other in our communities to start taking care of each other. And that will engender a very different approach. And then we will buy less stuff. It will necessarily deflate our corporations and our dependence on these long, crazy, convoluted supply chains. So we will disempower the corporations and the hegemony by taking care of each other. And then some of us, you know, like you, like the Equitable Enterprise people will say, okay, this is how we have to do business school now. So rather than focusing on GDP, business people will focus on sustainable profits. And this is how we have to talk to government in order to engender anti-monopolist policies and that. But that's, luckily, there's really smart people who know how to do that. We have to support them rather than everybody having to figure out how all this works.
I see there's an interesting comment. I don't know if you see it from Scott, how this is a very cynical perspective of modernity. And should we go the way of the Amish? Should we go back and sort of small and paternalistic? You know, do we need to go back and reject modernity? I think it's a really interesting question.
Well, it depends what you mean by modernity, right? I don't think we should reject gunpowder, say, or nuclear energy. Or, you know, I do kind of want to reject nuclear bombs. I don't like those. So no, it's not a rejection of modernity. It's a rejection of the mindset. It's a rejection of those who leverage the modern in order to exploit others and dominate people. So I don't reject the blockchain as a potential improved ledger for keeping track of things. I do reject burning the planet in a tremendous funeral pyre effigy to Bitcoin to prove our faith in an abstract token. So no, I think the modernity, which is modernity, is Nora in a doll's house telling Torvald, "I'm not going to be in this play anymore." That's modernity. You know, modernity is not Instagram figuring out how to create dependence in little girls, which then leads them to be anorexic or cutters.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You, of course, know Kevin Kelly's article and writing about the Amish and actually his observation and argument is that Amish do not reject technologies. They
Not at all.
Think about it, and it takes longer. There is a kind of a slowness to the acceptance, and it has to be a lot of consideration that it's positive for that society. So it's not complete rejection. It's just kind of not just throwing out and breaking things. It's taking it with a grain of salt and really examining it from multiple perspectives, which is
right. I mean, people think that the Luddites were anti-tech. They were not anti-tech. They were just against using technology to exploit human beings. So I'm pro-tech. I'm actually pro-modern. What I'm against is using very modern tools in the ways, in the style of feudalism, right? Yeah. It's the pre-modern approach to women and nature and labor and humanity that I'm against. I am, if anything, I am more modern than Facebook is about how to use digital technology.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. There are a lot of questions about, like, well, how do you change the mindset? And it's interesting because in Equitable Enterprise, we've had all these workshops and conversations about how to make an equitable corporation, how to encourage more co-ops. And one theme that unifying theme is you need to change kind of culture. You need to change how people think, what's acceptable, whether you call it mindset, Overton window, or the register, the terms we use. And it's interesting to me because you started in theater, right?
Mm.
And in our recent conversations, you said, I'm going back to theater. How do you change the mindset and kind of what is that we need to do? And by the way, the next series of conversations in equitable enterprise is about how do you change the mindset? How do you change the register? What do we know from history?
I would argue, I am an ideological pacifist. So
what does that mean?
It means whenever a conversation gets to the place of, well, how do we get people to ... I pause. I don't ever want to be in the position of how am I going to get people to do this or get people to do that, because then we're back in the kind of Walter Lippmann, I know better than they do, what's good for them. And I'm going to, get them to do this and get them to do that. That said, I could say I can get myself as far as what can we do to engender this or to engender that, to open more possibilities. So how can we increase the range of options available to people so that they don't have to choose to go to the dollar store or to get the payday loan in order to what else is possible? And what other stories are possible? So yeah, I'm all into telling stories that don't involve exit. What is a story I can tell businesses that doesn't involve them having to sell the company? And so what I do is try to tell the story of, okay, what happens when a restaurant sells itself to the mob? What does the mob do? Well, the mob uses it to basically to run money until the restaurant's gone. And the restaurant becomes the object of this other thing. That's what happens when you sell your company to the VCs or to the stock market. Now, your company is the medium now that's being used by finance to extract value from people. It's no longer, its mission is gone. You've been forced to pivot. So by telling the story and showing them and bringing entrepreneurs who've been through it and say, oh yeah, I had this great idea when I was 19. And rather than staying in college, I went and Peter Thiel gave me all this money. And then we pivoted to this thing. And now I have $90 billion, but I really want to give it all back because I feel horrible about having, elected Trump and led to wars and bad things. It's like, oops, so tell that story. So then kids look and say, oh, okay. I mean, when I go to business schools and talk to young entrepreneurs, the way I try to change the register is I say, can you imagine yourself being happy with tens of millions of dollars rather than hundreds of millions? And what approach could you take to business if you just want to have 10 or 20 million to your name rather than 500 million or $1 billion? What new possibilities open? And for a lot of them, that's a profound moment to even consider not hitting the home run, but getting a double. And what would that look like?
Yeah. And obviously business schools in self and how they teach and not looking at kind of social parts of it. It's basically eliminating some of the social sciences, sociology. I mean, business, as we know, businesses are social organizations. They shape how we live. They change our families. They change our labor relationships. They change our daily lives. But in business schools, we're not taught that. We're not taught to see business in that wider perspective. And
you could teach it also from a personal perspective. Show them that we have studies now that show that people who earn billions of dollars lose their ability to experience empathy for other people. You stick a billionaire in an MRI machine and show them a starving baby, the part of their brain that's supposed to light up doesn't. That's scary. It doesn't mean that they started out that way. It means that in order to accumulate that much wealth, they've had to train themselves to block out a lot of the impact of what they're doing. So if you let people know that, okay, you can do this, but look at your brain on billions, the same way they used to do, show a picture.
This is your brain on billions.
This is your brain on billions. It's a different brain. Do you really want to go there?
Yeah. That's it. Lots of questions about what are the signals, what gives you hope? Like there are people who are doing things in different ways, where's the signals of people kind of getting out of that mindset? I think a lot of our fellows, right? And
everywhere. uh, 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 in, I mean, where do I not see it? Kids, first of all, you know, I really, they don't, we're so worried. And I know there are, you know, kids who are abusing themselves or getting in trouble on social media and all, but I'm seeing kids able to block social media the way that social media executives are able to block kids. You know, they're not, they've got utility value with these things. And the way that they're using them, the way that they're able, it's like when you see plants growing through the cracks on the sidewalk, you know, I see things happen in the world or in their little tween lives. Like I remember, you know, my daughter, when she was a tween, who was it? Ariana Grande. She was doing this concert in Manchester, and someone threw a bomb in there. You know, people got blown up and injured and died. And I saw the Instagram and TikTok universes, they exploded with sympathy and empathy and mutual support for each other in ways, I mean, in iconic emoticon ways that I couldn't even understand, but I could sense the energy that was filling these spaces. I do see it even in that media, but I'm seeing kids returning to the real world, you know, with collectibles and vinyl and concerts and experiences. I'm seeing people caring about their communities. People talking about the commons is not just the tragedy of the commons anymore. People understand what that is. The way people are feeding other people in their towns, low income housing, and there's signs everywhere. They're much easier to see walking around, particularly after disasters. I mean, in my own town, after Hurricane Ida came, we're all digging each other's houses out of the mud, and it's me next to the MAGA guy, next to the soup kitchen woman, and it's just like we're all realizing, oh my gosh, we have so much more in common than these bizarre, you know, ideologies, these brands that we've bought into in terms of our political ideology.
So in apocalyptic sort of world, actually, the people, those of us who don't have the bunkers, we actually do come together and try to survive. It's interesting. One of our colleagues is in Canada, in Halifax, and he just had to go through a hurricane, and they were all preparing. And the next day, people came out and were walking the neighborhood and meeting each other and creating you know, all coming together around us. So is your book is sort of indictment of capitalism? And is it, or the other thing that I always think about, you know, capitalism itself has multiple manifestations, and capitalism in Sweden or Denmark, or, you know, we're always talking about Finland and other places, and enterprises operate under different set of rules. So it's not about just capitalism, right, Doug?
No, I'm trying to expose capitalism's vulnerability to the mindset in some ways, that capitalism really does favor those who go meta on the last group. You know, that Adam Smith really tried to prepare us for this by saying, when you have a company, you've got to have land, labor, and capital have to be respected equally. Land, where the resources, labor, the people, and capital, but we live in a world now where the capital is the only one with a seat at the table, and land and labor are the things from which value is extracted, but not fed back, but not supported. And when you take that approach with capital, then the capitalist is actually, whoever goes meta on the capitalist wins. So you have the capitalist, then you have the person doing the stocks, then you have the person doing the derivatives, then the person doing the derivatives of the derivatives. And as we saw in 2013, the New York Stock Exchange was purchased by the derivatives exchange. Right? That means the New York Stock Exchange, which is an abstraction of the market, which is an abstraction of human need, was consumed by its own abstraction. So meta, 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 meta. And digital is already meta. Digital is a symbol system. So digital encourages this Christopher Nolan like meta thinking, right? I'm a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. And this idea that you can just exit to the next level of meta, rise from the chrysalis of matter along with Ray Kurzweil as pure consciousness, or get in Blue Origin and get off the planet, or move to the asteroids, or have your bunker, your remote controlled place from where all humanity are just like the iron filings between these magnets. So yeah, it's a certain kind of capitalism. It's understanding that exponential growth is not compatible with nature. The only exponential growth we see in nature is cancer, and it kills its host. So we can't do that forever. We can't feed it forever. It's a model, it's a map, and it's here to serve humans. And then when it's not serving us, we should be allowed to assume different models. So capitalism might be great for what's so-called developing nations right now, where we can invest and help them build and get renewable energy. It might not be the best system to totally dominate a fully grown economy like ours. How do we move towards sustainable economics? How do you get off oil if so many of us are depending on oil profits for our pension funds?
It's not you're not advocating for anti-markets, like markets have their place, right? It's not about that. It's
balance
kind of capitalism that's kind of meta, highly financialized, highly sort of abstracted from reality.
Yeah, even toxic masculinity has its place, right? If we're at war, I'm going to throw a toxic male in the front of there, whatever. I mean, everything has its place, just in balance. You know what I mean?
I think in one of our workshops, we talked about pluralism and how do you create an economy? Like right now, we have an economy in which it's very hard for a co-op or any kind of more distributed venture to survive, get capital, resources.
Right. Because it must compete.
We have kind of homogeneity.
Right. Exactly. Because it must compete. Because the gamified economy that we're living in has replaced all economic activity. And it's like, well, if I just want to make a store, in the good old fashioned distributism way that the popes and Chesterton and Belloc and a bunch of people called for, distributed, where a business grows as large as it needs to in order to accomplish its function, and then it stays at that steady state. How do you have a steady state business on a main street where the rents are going up because Jamba Juice and everyone else is coming in? You can't even do that anymore. Then you've got to have regulation, you're going to have rate stabilization. What are you going to do? So the part that I want to do is pluralism, but we need multiple economies and ecologies existing simultaneously.
And that does involve creating some regulatory mechanisms to manage this exponential and limited and, not necessarily drive it for scale at every time. So,
right. Which goes against some of that early, and I was in it too.
Like we have no brakes, basically.
Right. But it goes against this idea, the early internet libertarian idea that this is nature and it's all just gonna happen. It turns out that yes, that human awareness can we can intervene on the development of markets and nature in order to mitigate some of its crueler effects.
Yeah. So the question here is that, okay, the problem isn't, Gil says the problem isn't just bunker billionaires, but it's regular people like us who are swallowing the story that escape from living. How do we shift that back to that narrative, back to the mindset?
That's why I wrote a book.
All of our institutions are baked into that.
That's why I wrote a book that's this critical and satiric of the billionaire mindset so that we can see it reflected in ourselves. I mean, the reason I decided to write this book was not because of what I saw with the billionaires. I decided to write this book during COVID because I saw the billionaire mindset manifesting in myself and my neighbors' behaviors. I had neighbors who were finally happy that they could cocoon their children with 3 other children, hire private tutors, and create basically a private school in their backyard that was like to their Rudolf Steiner wet dream of an ideal education, and I've always been guilty about having an Amazon Prime account, which I admit I have because I let them bring me stuff. And then COVID happens. I'm like, well, this is kind of sweet. And Grubhub and I added to my Netflix, I added HBO Max and Criterion Channel and Disney. And it's like, all right, I can I can do this. And I saw the billionaire bunker mindset, at least temporarily in me, as I tried to protect myself from the virus. That was, I get an Amazon. I didn't get one, but I imagine having an Amazon video thing, let them drop the package, wait till the coast is clear, and then go out and with my bleach towels and bring it down. So yeah, we all suffer from that. Retirement is the ultimate one, right? Where we all have to somehow earn enough money to then stop and take care of ourselves because no one else is going to. So you need enough money to take care of yourself from that moment that you stop working to the end of your life. And that's such a dark, lonely, way to, I understand we all need that security, but even the term, I just love the term social security, that imagine that our security were social, that you've been nice enough to your neighbors and the kids that they take care of you when you get old. You don't even have to worry about it. It's just obvious that they're going to take care of you. That's the society I would like to engender.
Yeah. So we have just a few minutes left. Anything we didn't cover? Like, what's your hope for this? Like, I get that one purpose of this book, and it's a very polemical book, and it's like I was reading and thinking, I can see Doug screaming through this book, and it's also really funny. Like, I have to say, you took a hammer to all of the TED conferences, the Burning Man, I don't know who else, Singularity U, all of that, right? So do you feel like this is just part of kind of just exposing some of that and changing how we see it? We don't see it as desirable, but we're seeing as something that's funny and to be avoided and kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is we all know that the central institutions and God and family and whatever and government are crumbling in a certain way. Our ability to focus on them as ways towards salvation, or that they're going to protect us, that is going away, but they're being replaced by other ones. Whether it's these, psychedelic visions of meta modernism, or some new technology that's going to save us, or an X Prize, or any one of those, TED Talk visions. And I guess what I'm trying to do is to say, no. Rather than replacing the old gods with new gods, why don't we return, exit to community, right? As we would say in Equitable Enterprise. How do we engage with other people instead and realize that our real safety is not going to be by clutching on to one of those illusions, but by turning to one another, that other people really are it, that rather than figuring out how to build walls to protect you from the refugees who are coming, how do we open ourselves to create just a more open, inclusive society? And that's going to be, safer and more prosperous and more fun for everybody.
Yeah. What have you seen? What's the reaction to the book? What are you hearing from people or the audience?
Interestingly, some people, the ones who read it kind of get that I'm doing something deeper. Most of the reaction to the book is really fixated on the figure and not the ground, right? They're fixated, as most of us are, on the catastrophes. So most of the interviews treat me as if I'm a bunker expert. Oh, so you've investigated. So then how do they get air? And how do they get this? And I'm like, dude, I only was interested in bunkers for like 2 weeks, only insofar as I understood, I used it as a real life metaphor for their whole approach to the world, which is faulty, right? But so many of the articles and excerpts, and they're interested in, the billionaires have bunkers. The billionaires are leaving us behind. And what they don't get is the subtitle of this book is not escape strategies of the tech billionaires. It's escape fantasies of the tech billionaires, that they are wishing for this. So where does that wish come from? Where does that fantasy come from? And how do we replace this dream, this nightmare, with something, way more pro-social? So yeah, but the reaction it's been big. Everybody's reading. 5 million people read the excerpt in The Guardian. So that's positive. And at least the end of that excerpt hints at that there's a better way. But I'm still interested to see if, I mean, I may have erred in creating such a provocative hook that the hook overshadows the tail, you know, the real important
People are
stuff.
focusing on billionaires and not the system and
Yeah.
the mindset.
Exactly, the figure and not the ground. It's what happens all the time. But you know, as a futurist like you, I do what you do. Institute for the Future are not futurists, right? We're not futurists. We, and if you let me use the word we as Institute for the Future, yeah. I mean, I say we are presentists. We are presentists. We look at conditions on the ground that people aren't looking at. And then you see all the signals of the things. I remember, you know, the first business thing I ever did in the internet was when the New York Times called me up to comment, to write the op-ed on AOL's acquisition of Time Warner. And I remember I wrote this piece saying, oh, it looks like Steve Case is cashing in his chips. You know, that must be that AOL is peaked, so he's buying a real company. And they said, oh, we can't publish that. This is crazy. You're insane. And I was like, all right, let the business page write the piece then. And of course, it turned out to be right. And it was the precursor of the dot-com bust, but it wasn't futurism. It's presentism. It's being able to see the ground rather than the figure. It's not the AOL buying Time Warner. It's the, why is this happening?
Oh, it's
That's
what
real.
I talk about temporal bandwidth, right? It's
Yes.
actually connecting the past, the present, and signals from the future to see those kind of larger patterns.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
But
like
it's
good
not
news.
an abstract exercise of future casting in a Svengali, you know, Rasputin
Yeah.
sort of fashion. It's through greater engagement with what's happening. That's the way to do business. That's the way to socialize. It's the way to futurize. It's the way to build technology. And it's the way to keep us all, I think, to keep us all from dying in a terrible catastrophe.
Oh my gosh. On that note,
I
thank
really
you.
do.
So,
Thank you.
let's not die in a terrible catastrophe. Yes, if we can achieve that, I think we can do better than that. We can really build something. This is kind of this moment. We all feel it, like something is changing, right?
Yeah.
Something and it's a turning point. So thank
Opportunity
you
to
so much.
flourish. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Doug.
you.
Great. I highly recommend the book. It's a great read. It's funny, it's hysterical, it's provocative, and it has a lot of philosophy and social sciences in it. So thank you so much for writing the book. Thank you so much for staying as our advisors and continuing this conversation. As I said, the focus of a lot of what we are now where we're going with the equitable enterprise is actually looking at how do we change mind? How do we change cultures? How do we change that? How do we do the mind shift? So please look at, we have a newsletter, we have a lot of stuff on the website, and we're going to continue with these webinars. There's another one coming up. So get on our website, and happy to share and get engaged with that. And thank you so much, Doug. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.